Wow, what a great start to March. Our show smashed through 10 million views, confirming that the Mike Graham Show really is the place to be. We're only in month 3, ladies and gentlemen, so thanks to all of you. We're doing brilliantly. Back to 141,000 subscribers as well. We need to get that number up, so please do it. Join our Substack as well. You'll get even more stuff over there. We had some brilliant guests through the door. We had a Baroness Bonanza. Claire Fox was in at the same time as Kate Hoey. That was pretty good. Another week of wall-to-wall news, not forgetting, of course, Keir Starmer embarrassing the entire nation once again on the world stage. Even Donald Trump thinks the man is a complete and utter idiot. Why is he still here? So put the kettle on, get your feet up. Here is the roundup of the best of last week. We are so back.
Shut up. Okay, coming up, we're going to talk about what's going on in the Middle East from an American perspective. We've got, of course, Jennifer Ewing here from Republicans Overseas. She's going to tell us what the latest is from the Trump Organization. I mean, some fantastic quotes yesterday from Donald Trump. Caroline Leavitt as well. Absolutely amazing. Should we give it another go, actually, on what Caroline Leavitt had to say to CNN yesterday?
For these families. Given what Secretary Hegseth said this morning, is it the position of this administration that the press should not prominently cover the deaths of U.S. service members?
No, it's the position of this administration that the press in this room and the press across the country should accurately report on the success of Operation Epic Fury and the damage it is doing to the rogue Iranian regime that has threatened the lives of every single American in this room. If the Iranian regime had their choice, they would kill every single person in this room. And so we can all be very grateful that we have an administration and that we have men and women in our armed forces who are willing to sacrifice their own lives for the rest of us in this room and for every American across the country and for every troop that is based in the Middle East. That's what these...
Secretary Hegseth was complaining that it was front page news about these 6 service members who were killed.
That's not what the Secretary said, Caitlin, and that's not what the Secretary meant, and you know it. You know you are being disingenuous. There is not... We've never had a Secretary of Defense who cares more...
Drones get through or tragic things happen, it's front page news. I get it. The press only wants to make the president look bad. Yeah, as you know, we cover the deaths of U.S. service members under every president.
The press does only want to make the president look bad. That's a fact. Especially you. No, listen to me. Especially you and especially CNN. And the Secretary of Defense cares deeply about our war fighters and our men and women in uniform. He travels all across this country to meet with them, to connect with them, and your network has hardly ever probably reported on that. You also had the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Chairman Kane, who's a brave patriot, standing alongside the Secretary at the Pentagon this morning, again expressing his condolences to these families. And I just told you that the President of the United States will be attending their dignified transfer. So please,
that's not making the president look bad. That's showcasing that.
We expect you to cover that as you should. We expect you to cover that as you should, Caitlin. But you and your network know that you take every single thing this administration says and tries to use it to make the president look bad. That is an objectable fact.
I don't think covering troop deaths is trying to make the
if you're trying to argue right now that CNN's overwhelming coverage is not negative of President Donald Trump, I think the American people would tend to agree, and your ratings would tend to disagree with that as well. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. On the school strike, back to that for a minute. I understand that the U.S. does not target.
He's been hanging around with Jennifer too long. Jennifer Ewing's here. Jennifer, good to see you. Welcome to the brand new Mike Graham Show.
Congratulations
thank you very much indeed. It's really, really good. We'll talk about Caroline Leavitt in a moment, but first, let's have a look at what Donald Trump had to say yesterday about the state of the war.
We're doing very well on the war front, to put it mildly, I would say. Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said about a 15. And we're going to continue to do well. We have the greatest military in the world by far.
I think there's no doubt about that America has the greatest military in the world by far. And it's clear, I mean, we were hearing, I think this morning, from people in the Defence Department in the UK, that it's possible that Iran will actually run out of their ballistic missiles at some point in the next few days. They don't apparently have any ships left. We saw the rather dramatic blowing up of the Iranian warship off the coast of Sri Lanka with a torpedo. We had to correct Pete Hegseth, by the way, because like a lot of Americans, he said, this hasn't happened since the Second World War. Well, not in America it hasn't, but actually we sank the Belgrano.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
with a torpedo
yes.
in the Falkland Islands. But you were saying to me, Jennifer, that you know, watching Caroline Leavitt there, who I think is brilliant, that she might have maybe gone a little bit too far with the way that she was criticising CNN.
I think, and I'm no fan of CNN, I'm no fan of Caitlin Collins, I do think that they have not covered the president fairly, you know, for the last 10 years
of course
at
not.
all.
No.
But I also think just because there is varying opinions within the, you know, Trump-supporting Republican Party about these actions, that she has to be very careful not to shame people into saying it's not okay to ask questions.
Right. And I guess particularly if you're asking questions about servicemen and women who are losing their lives.
Of course. I mean,
because that's an issue, isn't it?
Absolutely. You know, and the U.S. does not have a tolerance for American body bags coming back to the country. So we hope to see no more of that, obviously, in an ideal world. But it's going to be very interesting. The best case scenario at this point is that, you know, like you said, the ship was sunk, that, you know, my understanding is the goal is to make sure that Iran can no longer attack the U.S., through either its proxies
or any of its
itself.
neighbors,
Exactly. And then I think we have to turn it over to the Iranian people and say, okay, now this is yours to decide how you build back your country. Now, that statement even sounds a little crazy as it is, but again, President Trump did run on a no foreign wars that were not existential to the United States of America. That's why so many people who voted for him had no idea what we were doing involved in Russia, Ukraine. And probably for this as well. So there's a lot of debate and discussion going on right now within the Republican Party, within people who voted for Trump, and that's a good thing, right? I just don't want the...
Presumably, sorry to interrupt, presumably it leads to the next question, which is, you know, because what comes after Trump, you know, in a way, who is the person who steps up as the next sort of presidential nominee? Is it J.D. Vance? Is it Pete Hegseth? Is it somebody from MAGA? Because I keep hearing there's two kind of distinct groups. There's the MAGA Republicans and the sort of slightly less enthusiastic, shall we say, Trump Republicans. Because the other question is because of Keir Starmer being so useless in this country, you know, focusing on whether it's a legal war or not a legal war. Is there any of that conversation going on in America as to whether it's legal what he's doing?
Well, they had a vote yesterday with regards to the War Powers Act, and you know, people will say, "Oh, well, you have to go through Congress." Well, actually, none of the last 4 or 5 presidents have gotten any approval from Congress. You do have, whether it's 60 days, 90 days to act. And the other thing to keep in mind is whether it's Democrats or Republicans, they don't want to be on the record either supporting the war or being against the war, because at this point we don't know how it'll turn out. Hopefully, you know, this is very surgical and it's quick, and we get out within a matter of weeks. And, you know, peace breaks out amongst the Middle East, and it's the greatest thing in the world. But I think history tells us, especially after 20 years in Afghanistan, that there's a lot of people that are very suspicious that could be able to happen. And if we are, in fact, being slow-walked into another boots on the ground war, that's going to be a problem, and people are not going to want to be attached to that decision. But I think it's interesting, the Prime Minister of this country, if I truly believed, you know, that he was doing the best for the British people, and it's the best interest of the British person not to be involved in this, I'd have respect for that. I'm an America First person. I think I live in England. It should be, you know, England first as well. But to bring up legal issues, that just seems bureaucratic.
Yeah, I mean, also his position, it seems to me, is very, very shaky, because on the one hand he says, well, we didn't get involved in the original strikes because we thought it might not be legal. But now he's involved in the strikes currently, even though nothing's actually changed. And you kind of go, well, you can't have it both ways. You can't say on the one hand it's illegal, or it was illegal on Saturday, but now it's okay because we've been attacked. And as somebody pointed out to him in Parliament the other day, one of the backbenchers on the Tory party said, you know, if Iran strikes the Cyprus airbase with a missile or a drone, and we then hit them back, is that defensive or is it offensive?
Well,
and he couldn't answer. He doesn't know.
Exactly. And now the reporting is saying that did not come from Iran.
Right.
So that's another issue. So,
Yeah.
it's the fog of war. There's going to be all sorts of lies told and misunderstandings. And like anything else these days, oftentimes people's views are based off of the media in which they consume. So you could flip through 10 different channels in this country, in the US, and indeed the Middle East, and come up with think there's an entirely different situation
we
going
saw that on the weekend, didn't we? I was actually watching Al Jazeera, which I hardly ever do, just as a matter of interest, and they were reporting very hard that a school had been bombed by the Israelis and 73 kids had been killed. Turned out to be not true at all, and if indeed it had ever happened, it was more likely to be because of something Iran had done itself.
Well, I guess the press secretary addressed that yesterday. She was asked, was this the U.S., because these little kids were killed in a school. It was like, was this the U.S., was this Israel? And she said, we're looking into this. So if it was a mistake by the U.S. or Israel, we need to come out and own it and be very honest about that. I pray that's not the case. But again, I think that, just zooming out a bit, a lot of Americans voted not to be having these discussions now, voted to close the border, improve the economy, get on the housing ladder, make sure we can go back to families where maybe one paycheck you can have a great life. And now we're talking about the Kurds and, this faction of Iran. And I think that is not going to, unless this winds up very, very quickly, this is not going to bode well for the president.
It's not. It's a bit like we were just talking to Christian Drogan, our man from Watchman organisation up in Manchester, who's, flitting backwards and forwards on two sides of the street between people who are pro the Ayatollah and people who are anti the Ayatollah. And all it makes me think is as a British person, why the hell are they all here? What are they doing in Manchester, debating whether or not the Ayatollah was a bad guy? Bugger off back to Iran. Thanks very much indeed. And I know that's not the most charitable point that people can make, but, people are fed up with this kind of, foreign wars, forever wars, people that can't get on with each other, Hindus fighting Muslims in Leicester, enough already, just get lost, and if you can't settle your differences in Britain, go back to wherever it was you came from, thanks.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And, from a British first perspective, whether it's potholes in roads or schools or, my God, one of the worst things I think in this country, and I think it could really take a lesson from the United States, is drill, baby, drill. And even prior to
particularly now.
Exactly. And even prior to this war, I remember, Greg Swenson, and chairman of Republicans Overseas UK, and I were asked about a little over a year ago, after the president was reelected, what do you think about the special relationship going forward under Trump? And we were asked to speak at the House of Lords, and we said there's a couple of ways in which we're diverging, and one would obviously be our views on illegal immigration and border control, and number two, energy security, so, the United States is Joe Baby Joe. You cannot have national security or indeed an economy without energy.
Without energy,
Exactly.
Without energy that you control. Which we, of course, have now, and it turns out that Ed Miliband, the world's biggest bumbling idiot, was one of the people advising Keir Starmer not to get involved in this particular action. Let's have a look, though, at what Starmer had to say, because I think we've got this, Pooch, on the special relationship with Donald Trump.
What I was not prepared to do on Saturday was for the UK to join a war unless I was satisfied there was a lawful basis and a viable, thought-through plan. That remains my position.
Yeah. I find it slightly irritating that he seems to think that he alone makes the decision which then affects everything that Britain does, because I don't think, one, that he's qualified, and two, I really don't trust his judgment, to be honest.
Well, exactly, and I don't think he can claim to be an anti-war prime minister.
No.
And I know this is not a direct comp, so I'll say that before. But I think it was a couple weeks ago he was saying, "Yeah, let's put troops on the ground in Ukraine, which is another insane war, that did not need to happen." And quite frankly, until President Trump came into power, I've felt that the UK, the Europeans, and the previous U.S. administration were happy to just have this thing continue, for over 3 years. So I think a little more consistency, perhaps first principles.
But exactly right, because he makes out that he's this principled guy who's driven only by the law and driven only by, international commitments and all the rest of it. And yet he sort of blows with the wind, and you just kind of think, he was so sure that he wanted to make everybody know that we didn't get involved in the original strike, which everybody now says, which is what I said last week, is because entirely down to his slavish kind of love of the Muslim population and the Muslim community in this country, because he daren't say anything that would upset them, because he thinks he's going to lose their vote. Well, guess what? He's already lost the vote. They've already gone to the Greens. It's not happening. Yeah. But what do you make of what Donald Trump said about him, saying, we're not dealing with Winston Churchill here, which I think was brilliant. Is there a chance, perhaps, that the relationship between Starmer and Trump is now busted? Not so much the relationship between Britain and America, because, King Charles is going to go there. It's probably all going to be fine. The Chagos Islands deal is probably going to be blocked. But I wonder whether Starmer and Trump will ever get on again.
Sure, and I think, President Trump, for whatever his faults are, he's always quite polite when someone else is in front of him, another leader. Yeah. You'll notice whether it's Erdogan or Prime Minister Starmer, whoever, he pats him on the back and actually is quite complimentary to them, which is just diplomatic. But the two of these men have very big differences in, whether you call it ideology. And like I said, number one would be the border security. Number two, energy security. And number three, you'll notice there have been a lot of rifts back and forth between the two countries about censorship and free speech. The United States pulled out of a $30 billion tech trade deal that we were going to do with the UK because of the online safety bill. Right. So I think, to answer your question, that this issue is just going to bring that more to the forefront. I think the UK does have to be careful that it doesn't become irrelevant on the world stage. If you look at the Board of Peace that Trump had created, there's all these new kind of partners, and people can laugh and say it's a bunch of people in the Middle East, or it's the Central and Eastern European countries. But those are the people that these days seem to value in their borders and their sovereignty so much more than, say, Germany, France, England. So I would also keep an eye on that, the divergence between Central and Eastern European countries and the UK and Western Europe.
I think there's nothing more irrelevant looking than Keir Starmer was, I think, at the beginning of the week. On Sunday and Monday, when he sent out John Healey on Sunday, the Defence Secretary, to talk to all the various different TV shows, and basically not give an opinion on whether or not we supported what America had done, was so ridiculous. It just looked amateurish, it just looked bad, it didn't look clever, and if that was the briefing, if that was the best they could come up with, you just thought, well, we are irrelevant now.
Yeah, and make a decision, which I think, again, people have to have first principles. Make a decision. Are you doing this because you genuinely think this is not in the best interest of the British people? Sure. You don't want blowback. You think because of the open borders there might be, sleeper cells going off here. Great, make that argument. Just like I think my president in the U.S. has a pretty serious case to make for if he's going to continue what he's doing in Iran. He does. You need to tell the people why you're doing what you're doing. They may or may not agree with you. I'm not sure that the Prime Minister has done that.
No, he hasn't, because he doesn't even know if he agrees with himself.
That's part of the problem.
But listen, Jennifer, great to see you.
Nice
Thank you very much
you.
for popping in. Jennifer Ewing, we'll be talking about this, I'm sure, for a while, because it's not going anywhere yet. It would seem. Sassy says on the super chat, I was one of Mike's first few hundred subs to his new channel. I'm really proud you're doing so well. Look how far you've come. We all had faith in you. You guys have done it for us, right? 10 million views, 140,000 subscribers. We're going to press on and get more and more and more. And Mike, as a rocker, epic, sing us out, please, says Sue. What do you want? What do you want me to do?
We Will Rock You or something.
I could do Landlady, I suppose. Landlady. But I can't remember what the rest of the words are, so, I mean, that's not very good.
Hotel California?
I could do, I used to do, one of my karaoke songs was, what's his face? Don McLean, yeah. A long, long time ago, I can still remember when the music used to make me smile. And I knew if I had my chance, I could make those people dance and maybe they'd be happy for a while. But February made me glisten with every paper I delivered. Bad news on the doorstep. I couldn't take one more step. I can't remember if I cried the day that I remember he died.
With a bride, but something touched me deep
But
inside.
something touched me deep inside the day the music died. Let's talk to Philip Kisley, because he's a man after our own hearts. I think I would suggest to you that he is, in fact, a philosopher king, right? In the old-fashioned sense. Philip, I mean, you know, do you just, you know what I mean, don't you? When the women are in the plane, and they're backing it up, and they're going, you know, left a bit, you know, left down a bit, right down a bit, and we seem to have hit the terminal. I'm sorry,
well,
it's just funny, isn't it?
The terminal's in the wrong place, Mike. My God, who put it there?
Yeah.
Can I just say I need a bouncing dwarf around here? I've got a very high bookshelf.
Yeah, I mean, how are you going to reach the top, the Chairman Mao book up the top of the right-hand side there, you know, unless you've got a bouncing dwarf. But listen, we've got this idea, and I think it's a good one, that we do away with the BBC licence fee and we issue a new licence fee to people to watch the Mike Graham show. It's half the price and it's far more entertaining, because the BBC is lost, isn't it?
It's a no-brainer for me, and I think we could have. I was just watching the footage. I didn't want to actually come on because I was enjoying the conversation so much. I was just enjoying your footage on the boat there, and you were giving what I think should be the Mike Graham show salute.
Two-fingered salute, yes.
Starmer, I think we should make it a thing, you know. Don't be a plank here. Oh, I can't even get. I'm doing a female driver thing now.
There you go.
I can't even get my Mancunian victory sign on the on the screen there. I think the BBC was lost decades ago, and we're saddled with this regressive tax. Literally everybody hates it, apart from 10 people who work with blue hair and short fringes who work in the public sector.
Yeah, right.
You know, and that's we're paying this regressive tax just solely for their entertainment and for them to be miserable and lord it above us. Yeah. I think the independent media and various other aspects of the newer media have just destroyed the BBC. It used to be, which is actually quite tragic to me, because it used to be something worthwhile. And you only have to look at the archive on iPlayer to see what it used to be like. It's, you know, it's almost like a bit like a bullseye. You know, look what you could have won, look what you used to have. Yeah. And now it's an absolute travesty. Not only is it a travesty, it pushes an agenda which is anti-British and anti-working class and anti-everybody, really. I mean, just a couple of things very quickly, Mike. The anti-Semitism is just off the scale.
Yes.
You know, they're producing documentaries that have relatives of Hamas officials narrating them. Right. They've got some lunatic, half-naked lunatic jumping around the stage shouting death, death, death to the IDF at Glastonbury. And Glastonbury's another one as well. I'm sure we all hate Glastonbury. Yeah. But it's the comedy, right? So the comedy is dead. There is no comedy on the BBC. It's anathema to them, you know. And the only comedies they seem to produce are trans comedies, you know, which is innately just not funny. And there is the great comedy out there. It's just not on television anymore. It's on channels like this and on shows like you. A big plug for Intel lady here, who I think is superb.
Yes, she's great.
Yeah, I think she's doing stuff with you, isn't she? And Andrew Lawrence is another one. Just brilliant, really superb humour. And you had that woman, I can't remember what her name was, but I think she had some disability. She was saying, look, this is me. You're only allowed to laugh at me. You're not allowed to laugh at people who are funny, particularly men.
Right.
So you're not allowed to laugh at Ricky
Oh,
Gervais.
this is the female comedian who's got cerebral palsy. And they put her on Radio 4, and you can't hear what she's saying because she can't. What's her name?
Rosie Jones.
Rosie Jones, yeah. And you can't hear what she's like. And you go, why are you on the radio? At least put her on the telly so you can actually try and lip read the bloody woman. Kelvin's now appalled by.
Can I say that sympathetic analysis of somebody suffering from a serious health issue is making the best of herself is probably something that I may have to report to Ofcom myself.
Well, I was.
Yeah, but that's the sort of po-faced bollocks that's got us where we are.
Well, I was just going to say it's a good job I've already been cancelled because it would be in the post for Monday morning, wouldn't it?
Well, me too. I can't. I mean, Jeremy Carr used to say to me, he said, "Like, I've been cancelled already. I don't really care what happens next." That's the point. What are they going to do? He goes, "Oh, Mike Graham was impersonating Rosie Jones and making out that she sounds like a moron." Yeah, well, because she does. Sorry.
Actually, Mike Graham was being funny, and that is the worst thing you can possibly be. You're not allowed to be funny. I mean, it's the same as all the other stuff that's happening at the moment. I was looking at a story this week about you're not allowed to use certain words in the workplace and to advertise.
Oh,
jobs.
yes, yeah, like masculine words, right?
Yeah. So, but the words, they were framed as masculine, but the words were things like independent and ambitious.
Oh, yeah.
So you're not allowed to be independent. You're not allowed to be ambitious. You just have to be adequate. You're only allowed to turn up vaguely at 9 o'clock on Monday morning and be adequate and half do the job. So what they're actually doing is like the BBC with comedy. You're not allowed to be funny because that's ambitious and independent. You're not allowed to have a work ethic. You're not allowed to want to get somewhere. And so what they're doing is by banishing those concepts and those behaviours, they're filling that vacuum with the opposite.
Yes.
And what we get, like the BBC, again, is just this nonsense of filling the vacuum with obsessions about things which are nothing to do with the primary purpose of the organisation. Obsessions about LGBTQI plus bloody nonsense, race nonsense, sexuality and all of that kind of thing. And we're obsessing about these things, and all of this stuff holding us back.
It's like the tyranny of mediocrity is what I call it, and which brings me on to, I don't know if you've seen this story in the Times today, Oxfam, right? An organisation best known for molesting children, it has to be said, right? They've got shops in the high street. I've never been in one of them for years because of the horrible...
I thought you dressed there.
Ghastly... I used to buy clothes from there, yeah.
I'm astonished that any of them fitted you.
Thank you very much indeed. This is when I was younger, obviously. They now have to come out, and this is the most ridiculous thing I think I've ever seen Oxfam doing. They now say they've drawn up plans for transformation, right? Which means that they are no longer going to be involved in emergency relief work. They're stepping back from emergency relief work, which is what they're supposed to be doing, in order to become influencers on climate change, gender, and inequality. So now when you go into an Oxfam shop and buy yourself a jacket for the dinner party you're going to tomorrow night, it's not going to be helping any poor kids in Africa or the Caribbean or South America. You're going to be helping them to push the gender equality scenario.
Well, it's classic. That represents everything, doesn't it? Well, first of all, they were the most appalling, toxic, sexist, racial organization you could ever wish to. But people still cleaved to them, didn't they?
Yeah.
You get all of these old. My ex-mother-in-law was one, actually. You get all of these old Corbynista. I'm sure she's not watching this. I'm all right.
That's good. Yeah. No, she's probably not a fan. No.
No. Strictly BBC. You get all of these smelly old Corbynista types, wouldn't you? With their hand-knitted clothes and straight off anti-Semitic rallies and pro-Iranian, worshipping the Ayatollah. That's the latest thing now, tears for Hitler, getting back off all of that kind of stuff, and going into Oxfam and still thinking that it's this great thing that possibly it was at once time. I'm not sure, but people don't have an eye on how this country has changed, even though those people are really driving change. Some of those people, the older public sector types, they actually don't realize that now we are practically living in an Islamist country that certainly our prime minister is so weak, so pathetic, so puerile that he is influenced by this Islamist lobby, and Oxfam and all of those pathetic organizations are just part of that broader scene, aren't they? It's all the same thing, right? So if you're obsessed about trans, you're going to be obsessed about Islamism. You're going to support Hamas. You're going to hate Britain. You're going to hate the West. You're going to be a green communist, and you're going to bow down to Islam. So all of that stuff is changing massively, and you only have to walk down the high street to see it. Oxfam is a really, really good example, but so are the weed smoking, dirty immigrants who cannot speak English, who are unemployed. This is I'm being an
this
academic
is brilliant.
here.
This is brilliant.
Study. All you have to do is walk down the road into the sense of that.
It is extraordinary. Well, how about this, right? You'll enjoy this. The Times have spoken to a senior manager of Oxfam in Oxford, who says
Oxford Jail.
We are at a pivotal juncture in our history. We must reimagine our role, not as a dominant actor, but as an enabler of change, from implementing to platforming, from organisation to movement. And this is a bit like Starmer, isn't it? Starmer's now
probably bowel movement.
Right, bowel movement, Starmer now stands in front of a microphone and talks about, I will not be leaving my job that I was elected to do because I wish to change Britain. We don't want you to change Britain, you complete and utter bastard. We want you to actually leave Britain alone. Right?
Well, actually, about Oxfam. Right, so there's a journalist and a publisher called John Blake.
No, I know John.
I was surprised, right? So he was like a show business writer. Yeah. He became a publisher, and he seemed to do reasonably well. Yeah. So I had a book, and I went to see him, and he said, "Oh yeah, it'll be a huge success." Right. I said, "Well, don't you want to read it?" He said, "I made a very firm decision when I became a publisher, not to read any manuscripts," and
very wise.
At that, I decided that he may not be the right guy for this treasured work of mine.
And have you managed to get it published elsewhere?
No, is the answer. Nobody is interested. Quite right. There was some interest in my second wife. She was interested in it, but I had to put that to one side. Right. So he goes into Oxfam and he buys a very nice white tuxedo jacket. Yeah. And wears it for his wedding last year. Okay. And very proudly told us all in his wedding speech. Right. And I wondered whether
he's actually been married more times than you, hasn't he?
I don't think he has actually. No? But it's not a competition. It's just the way that it's just the way that love works, right? And
I've never experienced it, to be honest.
That does come as a surprise. That does come as a surprise to me. But so I wondered whether the fact that he was shopping in Oxfam for his wedding suit was linked in any way to the fact that he was a publisher who never read a manuscript in 25 years.
Very possibly so.
And I wonder whether those two facts might be linked.
Yes. But I mean, sorry, Philip, just before I let you to take over again, it's very indicative to me of the way we are now as a society where, the things that you thought were, static and sort of, I don't know, irreversibly kind of to be relied upon, like Oxfam as a charity. So if you really wanted to help out the the forlorn kids of the third world, you'd go and buy something in Oxfam. Now, you're not going to be helping the kids of the third world. You're going to be helping some, bloke in a dress in Chelmsford, who wants to be recognised as a gender-neutral individual.
Yeah, I think if you think about what's happened to Britain over the last 30 or 40 years, a gender-neutral individual, who wants to come out as look at me, some 45-year-old bloke finding his feminine side because he spent too much time. Well, a lot of this stuff comes from lockdown, doesn't it? So we had this crazy kind of spiral into insanity, didn't we? Which started with the Me Too movement, then went through BLM. Then in lockdown, everyone went insane. They were locked their computers for a year, and what you got was a load of middle-aged blokes stuck with pornography for a year, and then coming out the other end of it thinking they were women. And then on top of that,
that's the downside. The downside of pornography.
Yeah, it's the greatest explanation of what's gone wrong.
Certain elements of pornography obviously make you do that, and then
you say so.
And then after that, it's hammers, and then now it's worshipping the bloody Ayatollah, for God's sake. So what's happened in this country? It's a combination of tragedy and farce, isn't it? And I think that's a really important point, because the best way to cope with it, this is one of the, this is the last half an hour before I came on, has just been superb for me, because we've been laughing at it. And sometimes not always easy to do. And maybe the biggest, I was going to say the biggest weapon we've got there. Obviously, I've been watching it. But the best strategy,
or the smallest weapon with Mike,
we can have, the best pushback we can have is to laugh at these idiots, because that's what we used to do. That's the British way. That's the other thing. The thing that's gone by the wayside is the British way. The fact that we look at this absurdity, we've become silly, frivolous, and stupid, but the society's become dangerous because of it as well. I think one of the things we should do is laugh at this bloody nonsense and show people that the British people feel contempt for it. We feel contempt for these people. That's very important.
Absolutely. Philip, brilliant to see you.
Good
Great
to
to chat. Thank you very much indeed. Enjoy the weekend and continue to laugh. I had a great one the other day, right? And again...
Great what?
A story to tell you from my personal trainer, who was talking about another guy. Can
I just ask you?
Yeah.
I mean, you are not a great advert for him, are you?
I disagree.
No, you see,
he would say.
No, what do you mean? I disagree. Well, I imagine the running machine. The running machine has to be reinforced.
But you've forgotten how fat I was, right? Well, if you look at old pictures of me, right, from when I was on tour.
I'm looking at a pretty old picture of you right now.
Well, I mean, if you think I'm fat now, you should wait. I mean, literally have a look back a year ago, right? How about this, right?
Yeah.
So he tells me a story about not him, but another guy.
Yeah.
He gets a new client.
Yeah.
Right. A woman turns up. And until that moment, they've only sort of encountered each other online.
Yeah.
Right? And they pay 100 quid at the time, right?
Right.
The woman turns up, clearly a bloke.
Right.
Right? And in the sort of application form, it asks you to kind of delineate your gender.
Yeah.
Gender is put down as a female.
Yeah.
Now, when you're dealing with people who are trying to improve their health or, cut down on certain calorie intakes and all of that, you need to treat people differently, whether they're men or women.
Yeah.
And he said this guy, his mate, doesn't know what to do, because you can't ask the woman in question, are you actually a bloke? Because that would be potentially, illegal.
Yeah, under the Don't Ask the Bloke Act. Yeah.
He said, clearly got an Adam's apple, clearly a bloke, tall, strong, muscular.
Attractive?
Wants to use the women's changing room.
Oh, right. That is difficult.
Suddenly, you're in a really, really bad place.
Yeah.
Because everyone's too frightened to say, we can't do that. You're going to have to, change somewhere else. It's a real problem.
And so how is it resolved?
Well, it hasn't been resolved. Well, Baroness Fox is also here, your colleague. I don't know if we're going to try and do a double Baroness slot or something like that. But let me ask you about the Chagos Islands, because that's another thing that, again, up until this weekend, was a massive story. Lord Kempsell, who we had on last week, actually has been very good on this. It looks to me as though it's not going to go through now, doesn't it? What do you think?
I'm hoping. I mean, obviously Trump has changed his mind various times. What I do not understand is, the Americans have a base on Diego Garcia, and how we could not have allowed them then, whether you agreed with their strike or not, to use the base of Diego Garcia when that's been the whole kind of reason for the government pushing and pushing that
I'm
we've
amazed
got to protect it.
that Trump even accepted the fact that we could say no.
I think he was very badly briefed early on.
Yes.
And he didn't take a huge amount of interest in it because there were so many other things. I think he's now been engaged. There's been a lot of work done by Chagos supporters and politicians here to get influence through into the White House. But he does need, in order for it to be stopped, he does need to come out really strongly and actually say, this will not happen. I am not allowing this to happen.
Yes, I think he does. He does need to do that. Here she
Good
is.
morning.
Baroness Cox. See, I think I've never been in the same room as two baronesses before. I'm absolutely blown away by this. This is great.
So I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful. They've withdrawn the bill from the Lords. It hasn't come back yet.
Right.
And we're hoping now that it won't come back. And of course, we're getting to the end of the session when everything falls. So there is this chance still. But what is beginning to get through to people is just how terribly we treated those people back in the 60s. Unbelievable.
Yes. And what was the reason
wasn't
for that?
some past imperial thing. This was like, in our lifetime. And we literally...
And we made them live in Crawley, which is probably the worst thing of all, isn't it? The poor sods. I mean, they didn't even give them somewhere nice to move to, But no, I mean, the thing that I found extraordinary as well was the speed with which the Starmer government moved when the Chagosians went back to their own island. And the Sun had a great headline. It was, British subjects go back to British property where they were born, only to be served with an eviction notice.
Yes.
Because basically they wanted to put them in prison for 3 years for landing perfectly legally on land that they belong to and that they have every right to live in.
And finding the graves, of their ancestors, of their, not ancestors in the sense, but of their recent...
Of their parents.
And it's just so...
And then, of course, Nigel Farage tries to get to Chagos, which was a great stunt. And in fact, Starmer's such an idiot. If he had any brains, he should have let him get there and then accuse him of just using it as a stunt. Instead of which, as somebody said to me, it's the only boat he's managed to stop is the one that Nigel Farage is on, trying to get to the Chagos Islands.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Actually, Reform have been very, very strong on the Chagos Islands from the beginning, not just people who've jumped on the bandwagon more recently. So we'll just have to hope, and I hope that the common sense of the British public now, they're understanding it a bit more, is just going to make.
Well, I think that's right. I don't think a year ago most of us would have really known. I mean, funnily enough, when I used to first do overnight shows on TalkSport back in sort of 2010, 2011, there was one guy that used to ring up and talk about the Chagos Islands. I mean, I never really kw what he was talking about, but now everybody knows.
Everybody knows.
And nobody wants us to give them away.
Talking of sport there, can I just say how furious I was at the way that that football match was interrupted so that the Muslim players could
Maccabi
Tel
Aviv,
in the middle of
this one in Leeds last
night. Oh, sorry,
yes. Stopped.
Shocking.
Oh, yeah, well, we actually did it on Plank. We did it on Plank of the Week because when the Football League, the Premier League announced
I paid a big amount of money to go to a Premier League match or a match that...
Well, I mean, Pooch was saying, I don't know if you saw it on Twitter, or it was you that actually said it. He said, during, maybe Boxing Day, maybe we should stop the football and they can all go at the sideline and have some Quality Street and a couple of tangerines. But it is ludicrous, isn't it? But this is I'm going to say it, and because I don't care. In other places, you were like, ooh, the Islamification of every single part of our culture now. Claire, come on. I mean, it's mad, isn't it?
Well, I think it's more the absolute supine way that every institution, and that can be a football team, it can be a government, it can be anything, and you've just shown the Keir Starmer point, is, in many ways, and I'm not being funny, you can't blame Muslims for the fact that so many institutions are so desperate to bend over backwards to keep Muslims happy.
Right.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So, obviously the football players would say, well, we'd like to stop because it's the end of Ramadan.
Yeah.
And you just go, no, it's a football match.
Exactly.
We won't play you today.
Right. Also,
sit on the benches, and then you can go off when you want.
And if you're meant to be fasting, you don't stop to have some water because you're fasting.
No, but I mean, it was the end of fasting and it was for their welfare. All I'm saying is it's a nonsense excuse.
It is.
Yeah. All I'm saying is that it would be exactly as you say. There are all sorts of religions that live side by side in this country, and we do not organise the whole of society around every single religious festival.
And neither should we.
But no, of course not.
And
but
for the
what
same
what
reason,
I'm saying is that they would go out of their way in that instance. And I'm just making the point, it's an institutional problem.
Yeah.
Because what you should say is, well, we're not going to kick you out the team because it's the end of Ramadan and you need to break your fast.
You just don't play today.
But you won't play today.
Right.
You sit on the benches, go off and have a feast when you're ready, right?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Right.
But to stop the match in that way, I mean, that just sums up, there's something deeply unhealthy about trying to ingratiate yourself and call the Muslim vote or just Muslims. And the problem then is, for ordinary Muslims, is they all become the target of great hostility because people just think, as you say, bloody hell, they're taking over.
Yeah.
Whereas actually it's the institutions collapsing.
He literally now, every time he stands up, even if it's got nothing to do with foreign affairs, he says, oh, by the way, can I just mention that we weren't involved in that attack on Iran? And he goes, yeah, you're right, thanks. When does he stop saying it? You know what I mean? And it's all about what you said. It's appeasement of people who may not even want to be appeased, right?
No, I feel, sorry is the wrong word, but, you do think of the, as Claire said, the sort of, the average Muslim living in this constituency. I mean, how do they really want to find that the whole sort of institutional of the whole country is aimed at them and sort of trying to make, I don't think most Muslims, certainly in parts of the country where they're not in a large group together, just behave like normal, ordinary British people. Yes, because they are. Many of them really do feel British, but it's where there's been no integration and no attempt for particularly the women to learn English and to.
Well, I mean, is it not a particular problem to a particular part of the world? Mostly a very small part of Pakistan. Where an awful lot of the grooming gang problem comes from, where an awful lot of the non-English speaking people coming here are a problem, and the kind of the ghettoisation, if you like, of some parts of Britain, some parts of cities like Birmingham, like Bradford, like Rochdale. They're all from the same valley in Pakistan.
No, exactly. I mean, that's one of the things that has become obvious in relation to immigration, which is that obviously mass immigration has been problematic for reasons you've discussed endlessly on the show. But the truth of the matter is that what probably none of us were aware of, and to a certain extent you kind of just look at it's British Asian community or it's Muslims or whatever, is that there's been, from particular geographic parts of the world, we've basically brought in people who have an attachment to clan that goes way beyond even an attachment to their religion. It's a kind of clan-like behaviour. And we know about that, and it's like widely known. I mean, I saw a Labour MP, Naz Shah, on Newsnight last night, but she was talking about how her family, she was abused in her family. Her mother was abused, rather, and she ended up in prison for killing her father. And she said, this is like a closed circuit. You know, I mean, you weren't allowed to talk about it. We know that from the grooming gangs. In other words, in particular communities, that is a problem. Integration would challenge it. But actually, multiculturalism as a policy, rather than people from different ethnicities living side by side, multiculturalism as a policy encouraged people to stay within that clan. So, for example, if you're a woman in that who wants to escape the patriarchal nastiness of some of that clan-like behaviour, you don't stand a chance. You don't stand a chance because your Labour council is saying, no, you stay where you are. It's all part of your cultural identity, love. Do you know what I mean?
And that same...
And we saw that just the idea that sort of family-friendly voting is okay because it's, they need help.
Yes.
The people.
And it's part of that culture, so that's
and
okay
then. They want their own legal system too, almost in certain areas. And if you actually look at just that small concentrated groups that we could deal with, we could actually.
But do you guys? I mean, do you remember when this all began? Because it wasn't always like that. I remember when I was working. I got my first job in journalism, actually working for an Asian magazine out in Hounslow, and we were working with an awful lot of what were then, I suppose, the Idi Amin sort of generation of mostly people from Gujarat who had gone to Africa to live in where? Uganda, yeah. And then they'd all come to Britain because Idi Amin had gone mad, And they all kind of opened shops and opened businesses, and their kids went to school,
worked hard.
and they became very British, and they worked very hard. Many of them ended up voting Conservative, funnily enough, because I always remember there was a fantastic Conservative advert which was put out, and it had this kind of Asian businessman with a briefcase and a suit, and it said, "The Labour Party calls you black, we call you British." And it worked so well because, of course, they didn't want to be called black because they were, as far as they were concerned, they were from Kenya or they were from Uganda, you know, and they were from.
Well, Britain lost confidence in itself as offering anything. I mean, you just made the point. You know, the offer was to immigrants from anywhere that were coming. And by the way, we're not talking about such huge numbers that. Behind the backs of the British public, by the way, that's what we're talking about in terms of recently. But what used to happen was that when there was immigration, immigrants would come and say, brilliant, I'm in a modern Western society, I'm in Great Britain, they have I want to be British.
Yes.
And that was the aspiration.
Exactly.
Britain said, this is Britain, would you like to be British? And they said, God, how brilliant, you know, it's a country that believes in democracy and free speech, and you can make money,
you can
and
make
friends.
fortune, have a business, all of that,
But when Britain hates itself,
well,
it says, why don't you come here and improve us?
Yes.
You bring with you, we're horrible because we're colonialist, nasty, right-wing. We're really sorry we colonised you. We're less sorry we colonised these Chagosians, but there we go. But anyway, we're really sorry about that. What can we learn from you? So we actually lost confidence in what we were asking people to integrate into.
Well, Rachel Reeves said it yesterday, didn't she? She said that one of the reasons the economy's got no growth in it is because the levels of migration have dropped off. And you go, sorry, actually the levels of migration haven't dropped off, one. Two, the reason that the net migration figure is down is because so many people have left. It's got nothing to do with who's coming in.
But I mean, Claire, you're right on that, because the Afro-Caribbean population in this area where I was the MP, I mean, the older generation were so proud to be British. They, you know, they loved the royal family. They felt very, very, you know, maybe as the younger generation, because they've been brought into this whole idea that, you know, we're an awful country, aren't. But definitely the older, you know, just like the Asian population that came in. So, you know, we need to recognise that there is a problem, but it could be challenged and it could be faced if we faced up to it.
One of the things that's really shocking to me is that when we say you need to integrate now, you have to think. You'd think that integration would mean that you go to school, then you go to university, and all the rest of it. The problem is you go to university.
And it's full of people
who basically hate Britain, hate and basically talk about white privilege the whole time. And you flatter and cajole young second-generation immigrants, from immigrant families, second-generation British kids, and you basically say to them, being a British young person is not sufficient, but we would like to emphasise that we will recognise the important contribution you make as a young Muslim woman, or as a young Afro-Caribbean woman, as a young black,
but
and
we
white
just like
privilege
ourselves.
is a problem, and therefore you can integrate by joining the decolonise the university brigade and going on a Gaza march. I mean, that's almost like what the British establishment are selling to people. And so as a consequence, we've got this disaster, which is there's no one fighting for what it means to be British. To the people we want them to integrate into.
And if you do it, you're accused of being a racist or some kind of, colonialist, horrible individual, right-wing maniac. Speaking of which is not to link it to your organisation, but the Battle of Ideas coming up in Manchester, I think, is it soon?
Yeah, we've got on Saturday, in fact. We're off to Manchester for a Battle of Ideas North.
I was going to say I might pop up there, but I didn't realise it was Saturday because I don't think I could do it.
Right, yeah. So, it's just, I mean, we obviously have the big Battle of Ideas Festival in London, which we both at various times been involved in, and that's like a very big affair, but perfectly reasonably, a lot of people said to us, come north.
Come north.
And so we've got a small one-day event, but, it's very interesting about how politics changes, because I'm doing the opening session, which is... there we go. Nice leaflet. There we go. Saturday 7th. But anyway, we've got... the opening keynote is something like from Greenland to Brexit Britain, you know, the issues around sovereignty. And you think, Greenland, we've all forgotten bloody Greenland. So we've had to kind of redo the leaflet with a post-Iran ... from Greenland. I mean, the issue is sovereignty, and that's the opening one. Yeah. But then we've got big discussion about whether the North can be the economic renaissance, Andy Burnham and all the rest of it. Yeah. We've got an issue. We've got a discussion on post the Supreme Court. Right. Why can't we solve the difference between gender identity and sex, despite the fact the law is qualified? Yeah. What is holding it back? Why are the government not going down that route?
Why are so many public sector organisations in particular just ignoring the law and getting away with it?
Exactly. And then we've got Island of Strangers, some of the points about community cohesion. So obviously the by-election will be part of that. And then we've got an interesting one, which is we've got one, we're finishing, of course, on a big debate on free speech. We call it free speech emergency because I still think there is one. In fact, it's creepingly getting worse. But we have got one on young people, you know, being attracted to extremes in politics. And we've got the young people organising the session. We've got the various voices sort of talking about that. But I think that is interesting from the point of view of the Green vote.
I was going to ask you what you make of the Green sort of, you know, renaissance, if you like, from, you know, it's moved from, as Kate was saying, kind of slightly muesli, you know, knitted jumpers to suddenly, you know, pro-Hamas, pro-Iran, pro-Gaza.
Well, in fact, I've just been shown something, which is that one of the big motions at their forthcoming conference is to actually explicitly call themselves an anti-Zionist party. And so their sort of obsession with hatred with completely exploiting, but I think it's genuine, sadly. Their hatred of Israel being the most important thing. It obviously explains a lot that happened in the by-election. But I think the young people being attracted to them, I mean, first of all, you know, your party is imploded. The Jeremy Corbyn.
They never really got off the ground, did it?
No, so they're attracting that. I think very disconcerting for me is that whilst I'm very keen for young people to understand that there is an alternative to Labour and Tory as the mainstream parties, and that's a widespread phenomenon, the rejection of those parties which are just not fit for purpose anymore.
Do you think they're finished?
I think it will be very I think that they'll stagger on, but they're zombies. I can't see either of them being in government for a very, very long time. But obviously we've got a long way to go. But there's nothing there. They've got no base, both of them. But what I was going to say was that it's horrible the way that one thing that's happened politically is a negative anyone but reform. And I think that a lot of young people are now, and I mean, reform have got a real problem because reform are an alternative, and I'm not a cheerleader by any stretch, but reform are an alternative that at least is based on solid ground, which is millions of people who identify with Britain, who believe in sovereignty and self-determination, and also want to have their voices heard. And they've had time to kind of start developing values, whatever, about policies. The problem with the anyone but reform youth vote that's going to the Greens is that it's entirely negative. It's entirely based on demonising, actually, a large section of the British working class. And it's based on a very nihilistic and actually a kind of bigoted view of the kind of people who will vote reform. So they're described as racist, fascists.
It's a snobbish thing
hope,
as well,
not hate. A real distaste. That's a very good way of explaining it. It's a real sort of like, oh, we don't want those people in. But that's going to cause electorally problems for reform. We saw it in Caerphilly. If that youth vote... So it's a very negative way of stirring up youth activism. That the only thing they're doing is voting for somebody that's not them.
Well, that seems to be the thing that reform we've got to worry about the most. One, that people will just gang up on them and try and stop them getting out wherever. But also, two, finding enough people who are decent enough to stand in all of the various, you know, constituencies that they're going to need to find candidates.
Yes, and then they're bound to get somebody who's, you know, has done something in the past.
There will be,
disturbed. The media will go.
Well, I know they've got a massive vetting operation now.
But
even despite having that, you know, councillors slip through the net. You know, you get some guy who's, you know, had a picture done in a Nazi uniform. You know, you're just never going to get away from that.
I mean, obviously, to a certain extent, I'm not sure what your view is going to think of this, but the truth of the matter is that in some ways Restore have done a good job on vetting for reform, which is the kind of Rupert Lowe vehicle, seems to have attracted quite a number of people who might have been the kind of people that vetting would have found out.
Well, I think, again, for the same reason that the Reform have always said we don't want anything to do with Tommy Robinson, that helps them in a way, doesn't it? Because although some people might go, although you just like the Tories, it kind of separates them out. It means there's some people over there who are more right-wing.
I mean, the thing about Reform is, I just to say, is that they've got a real challenge. I mean, they've got to find candidates, but they also, and I think that we all know this, but Kate and I often talk about this kind of thing, which is running a country's not an easy thing to do, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm a great sort of critic, and I can stand there and I can,
But you don't want to be the Secretary of State.
But no one's going to ask me to provide energy to the nation's houses, right? Or in fact, organise defence, or actually understand how things work.
But isn't that part of the problem?
And they are literally in a position where they could be in power.
Yeah.
So they've got to get serious, right?
But they can't be any worse than this lot.
I'm enthusiastically hoping that something happens.
Right.
All I'm saying is, for those people who sort of say, why can't they... It's like they've got to concentrate on the possibility they could be running the country.
I think, I'm not a, I don't know every detail of what Reform's doing behind the scenes, but I think they are beginning to think about that a lot more and get in some good people. But, the awful thing will be if Reform get in and then they kind of make a mess of it, because then we might as well all go home.
But all I'm saying is I'm commending them in a way for
thinking.
I feel as though they've grown up quite a lot. That's what I'm trying to say. They realise themselves that they've got to be in a different
and they've also, Nigel Farage has obviously also realised that he does need more of a team around him.
Yes, he can't do everything.
Just do all of it. And I know that's difficult for people sometimes to let go of that kind of, the reins of power. But which also brings me back to one of the reasons why perhaps the Tory party have kind of had everybody's faith knocked out of them, and the Labour Party are now doing the same, is because it feels as though at the moment in Britain, and I know that you don't want to talk it down, nothing really works. Like if you look at the Home Office doesn't seem to work. The Foreign Office doesn't seem to work. The Defence Department doesn't seem to work. They can't. I mean, I don't know what they've been telling Keir Starmer, but we're woefully unprepared for anything. We were talking about Dubai earlier on in the day, and they've got this amazing kind of defence system, this Iron Dome type thing. We've got nothing. No. We've literally got one ship which is sitting in the Channel. It's currently on its way to Cyprus. It's going to take 4 days to get there. 2 helicopters. You hope that they've got enough fuel to put them up in the air. And you just think, if somebody did launch an attack on Britain, what would we do? Nothing.
I know. Look, we're run by technocrats. We're no good at being technocrats. I mean, the one thing I thought when Keir Starmer came in was, because there'd been quite a lot of drama with the Tories, and you think, I suppose at least he's a technocrat. He might kind of like boring, but he'll be competent. I mean, the most incompetent people who talk about competence, I mean, their lack of ability in relation to governance indicates something very important, which is they really want, which I think is what's happened to politics in general, which is politics have been gutted of any depth or substance or the kind of people who would actually, or belief or anything. So you've got these kind of like robots, but they're not even good at, that's what I'm saying, they're not good at even being robots. They just sound like robots, but you do think actually the robots might actually fix the defence situation. They might actually make something work. It's like student politics. That's really what it reminds me of. It really reminds me of going to an NUS conference and these people kind of endlessly passing motions and so much of it's performative.
But I also think we've got a civil service that has actually lost its way completely in terms of both.
And why is that, do you think?
Well, I remember, I think when we left the EU, I think the civil servants really did miss the fact that they could always excuse everything by blaming Brussels had said this and they had to do it. And I think they missed that sort of being able to, get Brussels to tell them. But, I do think they've become more biased, or I used to feel, I remember defending years ago our system against the American system where they get rid of everybody when there's a new president, and thinking, it's good, we've got people who are quite prepared to work for whatever political party people have elected. And that seems to have changed. You do feel they're more political.
Oh, they very much are. There's no question about that, because I can't remember which union it was, but one of the civil service unions said, if Reform get in, we're all going to walk out.
And
you go, well, sorry, that's not part of the remit. You've got to do what you've got to do.
Well, we've had a good example of, of both the kind of what people call the uni party and the civil service, which is, before he left office, Rishi Sunak came up with this ridiculous idea of a generational smoking ban, which after you're born on a certain age, you won't be able to buy cigarettes. Which means at some point in the future, a 43-year-old will be legal, and a 40. Somebody born the day before who's 42 won't be. I mean, God knows what's going to happen, by the way, in the corner shop when you're trying to check the age. Anyway, you've got that.
Well, the other bit you didn't get is that everybody who's now still smoking is actually buying bootleg cigarettes anyway. No, exactly. For about £5.
So, but the thing was that Rishi Sunak comes up with this absolutely bonkers idea. Because civil servants, somewhere in the Department of Health, they had this mad idea that no one else had been foolish enough to accept, and he wanted a kind of. I'm going to save lives, and I'm going to stop people from dying of cancer. This is going to be like my legacy. Right. The thing is, he then called the election too early, so the bill dropped. Yeah. So everyone goes, thank goodness for that. What a great relief, right? Guess what? One of the bills that the Labour Party picked up. So it's back. We've just passed it. So we've just been through the Lords. But this is what I wanted to say was, at the Lords, during committee, a stage of the bill, at least the Tories started saying, look, it was very embarrassing we brought this in the first time, but we're at least going to fight it now. And then right at the end, we just watched it, Kate and I. The Tories just said, OK, we agree with the bill, right? Now, the backbenchers weren't happy, but the front bench. And it was a really important reminder, because I can like Kemi Badenoch, and I can think she's saying some good things, and because we're in opposition, sometimes the Tories are the kind of people that you're going to be agreeing with on Chagos or on whatever. And then when I see them just absolutely gutless, but that was partly caused by civil servants who said, here, Minister, I've got a bill to sell you. Yeah, right. And that's honestly what the Labour government is like. Yeah. They are literally delivering bills that some civil servant have said, this is my hobby horse, can I give it to you? And they buy it hook, line and sinker.
And that seems to have been what was the problem at the beginning of their government, wasn't it? Because all these civil servants, from what I'm told, turned up with ideas for the Treasury, which they'd been giving to people in government for years and always being rebuffed. But except Labour just went, oh, all right, then we'll do that.
Because we haven't got any of our own ideas. We haven't got any principle.
And yet they had all that time to prepare. They knew they were going to be in government. We knew that.
Well, the great summation for me was Sue Gray, wasn't she? I mean, she was brought in to run the first 100 days. She only lasted 93. And you go, well, so you didn't have to give your own plan for the first 100 days. It's just been absolutely
She's now
ridiculous.
in the House of Lords. I haven't seen her around much.
No, she's in the House of Lords. She doesn't speak often, does she?
No.
She's kind of...
That's probably a good thing.
But everyone's in the House of Lords at the moment. I mean, it's like...
It's very interesting. There's a lot of new Labour women have come in more recently.
Well, Jackie Smith's in there,
a lot of them.
She's effective, though.
And they're suddenly finding that they have to work. They hadn't thought, I think, many of them, that they were going to have to be there till late at night, because we have different hours from the Commons and we work quite late. Yes. And I think they're finding that it's not just their title.
It's a kind of it's a voting fodder question. They've literally brought people in. They don't necessarily anticipate that they're going to be joining in the conversation. They're not there as independent thinkers. Right. And
what's happened to Keir Starmer's great reform of the House of Lords, by the way?
Well, they are getting rid of the hereditaries.
Well, there's only 99
although the bill has to come back from the Commons, so it's still not actually legal yet. But and it is. I would have been very happy just for every time a hereditary died that you didn't replace them. And that would have been. But apparently that was agreed. That was wanted. They wanted that some years ago, and the Tories didn't accept it. So now Labour is saying, well, we can't possibly do that. So they're going to get rid of them all at the end of this session.
Okay. If the bill comes back.
This session being what, till Easter?
May.
May. Oh, really? Okay.
So they could all be going. I mean, it's been vindictive and nasty and unpleasant. And it's not that, we two, of all people, do not support the hereditary principle. I mean, we don't think that bloodline makes you superior. But on the other hand, they could have handled this with some class, and they certainly did not.
Very, very hard.
But also kind of a bizarre thing that has happened anyway, because Tony Blair was meant to get rid of them all, and then they somehow ended up keeping 99. Why did that happen?
No, exactly. That was bonkers. But in your general point on reform, absolutely the House of Lords should be reformed. There's all sorts of things that you can say. The problem is that it's been done in bad faith. So they went for the hereditary peers. They're now potentially talking about saying that you have to retire at 80, which of course doesn't work, because the House of Lords is full of people who are 80 plus, who are actually really brilliant or active, And some of the people who are 40, when they brought in young people, are absolutely hopeless, nutties who sit there nodding things through. So why would that make any difference? The main thing is that there's a problem constitutionally of an unelected second chamber, but the Labour Party aren't serious about tackling it. They're not really going to reform it. So what they've done is said, they've got more than us, so we're going to stuff it full. Yeah. Now, in the last week, they've had to, 3 or 4 of them have had to retire, and I don't just mean Mandelson, because they didn't bother doing vetting of the people they brought in. Right. So 3 peers over the weekend were forced.
So is this other Labour guy, the other Labour guy who was friends with the paedophiles, he's gone as well then?
Well, he's had the Labour whip. I mean, you wouldn't come in, would you? He's had the Labour whip removed. But there's another one. Somebody who ran Newcastle further education colleges, he was forced to resign from his job in disgrace, and now it's come. Now it's come up that he was kind of spending quite a lot of time philandering rather than working. But they offered him a peerage. Another one, Anne Lim, who didn't have a PhD. She claimed she did. And she didn't. But then she's been running a charity where people seem to have made an awful lot of money when they sold off the charity. She's also, and you think, oh my God, even basic vetting. I mean, what you should have done, which is what most people do, is Google.
Well, I was going to say, Google will be your friend.
The thing to say is, because we were both in, while there was still a Conservative government for the last, for about nearly 2 years of being in the Peers, and the government got defeated regularly. So the whole idea that somehow it's a huge Tory majority, the crossbenchers are crucial. The Lib Dems have got far more than, in a sense, their voting.
They shouldn't have as many as they have.
So, it's just ridiculous that Labour think they can absolutely flood people and get a majority, because it doesn't work like that.
And that's not how it should work, really, is it?
Not
They shouldn't even want it to work like that. That's the problem. No. Sharon Davis, we've had on a couple of times. She's great, isn't
good
she?
that she's come in.
Yeah. Look,
she's been very brave.
There's some great people in the House of Lords, many more than people might think. And of the new people, Sharon Davis is one of the most exciting people. There's all sorts of people, right? And by the way, on all the benches, it's not just on one side. But I think that Kate's really right.
You're a lot more sensible.
But we're very lucky because we're now what's called non-affiliated.
Non-affiliated, so we can be the normal kids on the back.
Would you do a kind of Jackie Smith if you were asked to by Nigel Farage in a reform government? Would you go in and be a minister of some kind or another?
I helped Boris when he was mayor.
Yes, I remember,
the grassroots sports stuff, which was good. Now I'm getting too old.
That's the Anne Whittaker answer.
That's absolutely not true. That she's getting too old, by the way.
No, I don't agree with that either. No. I think they'll come for you, to be honest. And maybe you
honestly,
as well.
I'm enjoying.
Have you burned the old bridges?
Claire and I feel very similar. That we like being. Well, we are independent. Now. We like that.
Me too.
But we're happy to work with people who believe in things.
Case
Genuinely, we will be helpful in situations where we think that the most important thing is politically, or for the, as they say, for the country. But sorting out the mess that we're in. I think that we can safely say that we will do what we can, right? And we won't be sectarian about it, so we're not working with you or be. And I would say that about anyone, any party.
But I think when
reform are going to have to get a lot of people in the House of Lords, and they won't know what they're doing. Right. And therefore, there will be those of us in the House of Lords who will be able to say, well, we could at least show you,
and there's more
a few of the rules, right?
There's more than us who think like that. There's a few others.
That's good. Well, it's been delightful having you both here. It's been like just being out for lunch or something without the food. It's been fantastic. I had to check myself that we're actually broadcasting it, which is brilliant, which is what we love about this.
Good comments, Mike.
Some comments, chuck them up before we go, shall we? Honestly, you don't see a Baroness for ages, then 2 come along together. From OC2, very good. And Mike and the Baroness could be a group, says South London Sarah. Thank you very much. This is a regular thing, double Baroness segment. We could have discovered something here, maybe. And also, we were asking earlier if people want to come along to the Battle of Ideas in Manchester. What's the website?
Yeah, it's battleofideas.org.uk. Right. I have to say, I think that we're almost on a waiting list, but we are selling tickets on the day.
Okay.
But look at it. If you like the programme, turn up. That's the story.
There you go.
And keep your eye on us and so on.
There is. The Baroness should be on the live show. We're doing a live show in Shepherd's Bush on May the 6th, right before the elections. If you happen to be in town, we might get you on. Thank you very much indeed. So, listen, lots and lots of you have been in touch, and many of you have got very important things to say. But I have to say, our next guest, and we'll never have anything more important to say than anybody else, because she is the mother of Rian White, Siobhan White, who is a woman who you might have seen on other shows. You've seen her on GB News. You've probably seen her on Talk. Her daughter was murdered by a migrant who came to this country and who was offered, sanctuary, who was offered all of the things that we enjoy as part of our civilized society. And this character, this scumbag, decided that what he would do would be to attack a woman who was actually helping him. You're all, I'm sure, aware of the story, but let's say a very good morning to Siobhan, because Siobhan, we really love to see you. We sympathise in a way that I don't think any of us can even know. But welcome to the show. Thank you.
Well, good morning.
You've got some important news to impart to us, though, haven't you? Because what you're telling us, and I find this incredible, is that despite what happened to your amazing daughter, she was stabbed multiple times, attacked in a horrible way. The man who did it has now been sent to jail. You've had no contact whatsoever with the Prime Minister of this country, and even with any other so-called Labour Party kind of cabinet members who talk about safety for women and girls all the time. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely no one. Jess Phillips, just after, not long after Rihanna passed away, Jess Phillips contacted my girls, spoke to them for a maximum 30 minutes, promised them everything in Rihanna's name against femicide, not a thing after our local MP, Matt Weston, not a thing until recently, as I've named him, and I've now written to Keir Starmer.
Right. And I've got a copy of what you've written, but if you'd like to, would you be able to read it out to us?
I haven't actually got it in front of me, but...
Okay. Well, tell us roughly what you're asking him to do.
I asked him to meet me to discuss this and why it's still happening, basically.
Yeah.
I need answers. I need answers as to why this was allowed to happen, why Rihanna was taken from us in such circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. And how he can justify his continued kind of adherence to this plan, this kind of idea that, all immigration is good, and all, people who come here from other countries have got things that they want to do which are worthwhile. I've got your letter here in front of me. I'm going to read it out. I'm the mother of Rhiannon White, who was brutally murdered in October 2024. I again am emailing to request a meeting to discuss this matter. My daughter's death was avoidable. The grief and trauma this has left us with is something you will probably never understand. And this sadly isn't a one-off. Katie, Lily, Stephanie, amongst others, our women of England are being murdered, raped or attacked on a daily basis. I need answers. Not one single member of the government has reached out. Broken promises from Jess Phillips. Our local MP, Matt Weston, reaching out now that I have named and shamed him. This isn't a matter to be brushed under the carpet, and the matters of Epstein or Mandelson to be used as a cover-up. It's disgraceful. That issue is in America. This is our country, England. It needs to be dealt with ASAP. I think we all would totally support what you've said there. I think it's really difficult for us to feel how you must feel, but it's just incredible, isn't it? That
it just grieves me though, Mike. Is the fact that he can go out and apologise to Epstein's victims, and yes, my heart is with those girls, but they're in America. They're not here. What about our women and our children? It's like he just doesn't want to know. He just doesn't care enough.
Right. Can you, I know this is going to be difficult and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but can you tell us how you found out what had happened to Rhiannon?
Rhiannon had been on the phone to her best friend, Emma.
Yeah.
She was walking to the station, which is literally 60 seconds from the hotel.
Right.
Her friend Emma heard a scream. And then the phone went off. Emma phoned myself, but obviously I didn't answer the call at first. I was doing something. And then she spoke to Rhiannon's younger sister, Cara. She said, I think something's happened to Rhiannon, being attacked, because you don't like to think the worst, obviously. So then we're on the phone to the police, Rhiannon's other siblings. I phoned the hotel. Is Rhiannon there? No, she's left. Well, you need to get somebody over there because something's happened. And then it was literally phoning hospitals, phoning police, around family, etc. And you never think it's going to be as bad as what it is. You think she's just been beaten up, etc. Then I was on a group call with my children, and I got a call off the police, and they said they've got Rhiannon. Because I phoned the Manor when I lived in Walsall at the time. Manor was the closest hospital. I phoned the Manor, expecting her to be there. Then the police phoned. They said, we've got Rhiannon, we're taking her to the Queen Elizabeth. It's either life-threatening or life-changing. And that was it. We were literally at the hospital within half an hour, I think.
Yeah. And that was just out of the blue, right? You just were living your normal life, just doing what you normally do.
Home. She had a week off.
Yeah.
She spent it with family. And he decided that, I don't know. I mean, unless you actually watch the full video footage from the hotel, there's clips obviously in the court on the media, etc. But when myself and Rhiannon's two sisters watched the full footage, it was like 2.5 hours. It must have been that he just watched her. She went outside for a vape. He hung around the reception area, came out, walked into Rhiannon, bearing in mind there was 2 other women in front of her. Apparently it was all reported to Serco. We don't know. It wasn't. We don't know if it was written down, because if it's not written down, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But not one member of Serco got up and did anything about it. They just sat there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just awful. And when he went to trial, you obviously were in the court. Were you at some points?
We were there the whole time, yeah.
And did you have any inkling from him that he was sorry or that he was mad or anything at all? I mean, this is the problem. You see, I feel so sad for you and your family, but also angry that these people are coming into the country who are, you know, dangerous and, you know, obviously dangerous. And it's like, what the hell is going on?
There was nothing. When he got arrested, thankfully, British Transport made the arrest within 5 hours. He went back to the police station and fell asleep. And then during the trial, his barrister, I didn't hear it. I'd actually walked out of the courtroom at the time because of something else that had been said. And my sister came out and she was fuming, and she said that the barrister turned around and he said, well, can you imagine how scared and frightened he is? Well, how does he think Rhiannon was feeling?
Yeah. Also, I don't care how scared and frightened he is, to be honest.
I don't care how scared and frightened. I hope he's scared and frightened for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
But to bring that up, I mean, his barrister mentioned race. Not once through any of this have we mentioned race. It was one person who took my daughter.
Yeah.
But again, now we come back to the government. It's, why are they allowing these people in when they're undocumented, unvetted?
Yeah.
We don't know what diseases they've got. We don't even know if that's their real age, because their generic age is the 1st of the 1st, which this scumbag tried to do with Rhiannon. Right. He lied about his age. He called the forensics a liar. He just had no remorse or care in the world. Just shrugged everything off.
Yeah. And does it not make you think, because it makes me think this, that there are people who come from countries in the world who are not human in the way that we are human. They don't have any kind of remorse. They don't have any sense of right and wrong. They seem to think that they can do whatever they want.
No, the thing is, though, I mean, it came out that he had fled South Sudan to go to North Sudan because he was in fear of his life. He left his pregnant wife and his family in North Sudan. And then obviously he went to Libya, Germany, Italy and France before he came to England. But his barrister was more concerned about him fleeing for his life, because apparently a soldier wanted to marry his sister. you just don't know what to believe. It's consistent lies all the way through.
Right. And what sort of support did you get from the judicial system in terms of advice or lawyers kind of talking to you? What did you get?
British Transport Police have been absolutely fantastic. From the minute they had that arrest until recently, even now, we still stay in touch. Paul Atwell, the detective superintendent who took the case that night, I'm just thankful he did. Our liaison officers, Tim and Carl, have been brilliant. They've been very honest and open with me, because I said to them, if I feel like you're lying, I won't have any faith. Because obviously I had no faith in their systems, etc. at the time. You know, I was heartbroken.
Yeah, of course.
British Transport Police have been brilliant. Our barrister, Michelle Healy, I could not have wished. In fact, I refused to do the trial if we didn't have Michelle. As that side of it, I honestly can't. You know, I'm grateful to them. I will be for the rest of my life.
Yeah. And let's talk a bit about Rhiannon, because sometimes, you know, when we talk about these terrible events, we don't think about the person who's no longer here. Rhiannon was your daughter. Tell us a bit about her. What was her kind of demeanour? What did she like to do? What was her favourite movie? What was her favourite, song?
Yeah, she genuinely was the softest, laid back person you could ever meet.
Yeah.
She didn't like, it's not that she didn't see, but she didn't like to see the dangers in life, hence probably working at that hotel. But, you know, she just liked to get on with everybody. And I used to keep saying to her, you know, even from a child, like, stand up for yourself, because she was quite soft. Her family were her first and foremost. Her little boy, again, she doted on him, her nieces and nephews. She became my best friend. Obviously, she was my friend anyway. She was my daughter, but she lived with me and we did everything together the last kind of 2-3 years. But if Rihanna saw someone struggling on the street, she would give them her last pound. That's how soft and gentle she was. She didn't like to see bad in anyone. And, you know, I was worried when she started the hotel. Obviously, I'm a mum.
Yeah.
But I think there's a group of like 5 migrants who used to talk to her, and, you know, her heart used to go out to them because they were like gay and they've had to fled their country, or that they've come over to try and, you know, genuine help and bring their families over, etc. But as a whole, she was just a little darling, honestly.
Yeah. And you've got her little boy to remember her by. Does he look like her?
He's her double. He's got the blonde hair, blue eyes. Personality, yes. But Rihanna had a bit of a dark sense of humour, where we've got a bit of a... She was very quirky and dark. He's very out there. You know, he's got a great little sense of humour. But to look at him, he's like looking at her as a child. Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Wow, amazing. And if you can get this... I'm going to call him a scumbag, Keir Starmer, because he is, in front of you. If you could get him in front of you, what would you say to him?
One thing I will say is he really won't like me when I finish, but I don't care. I want to ask him why he's so quick to fly off to China, fly off to America, do all this for everybody else, but not his own women. Why has he, as you know, this big prime minister of our country, etc., why has he not reached out? Why has he not took a firm stance on this and said, look, enough is enough?
Yeah.
You know, that he's just, you know what, I'll let you in. I'll let you into our country, and basically you just go and murder our women and children, it doesn't matter. And our men. I despise him. I absolutely despise the man. And I know it was the government before him as well. But if he cared about our people, why has he not stopped this?
Yeah.
You know, why is he not? You know, this is what I want to know. Why have you not stopped this? Why is my daughter not here anymore? Because you allowed this scumbag into our country. I've got to live with that for the rest of my life. Her little boy's got to grow up without his mum. Her sibling, Rihanna's siblings have lost their sister.
Yeah.
And 2 days after the verdict in October last year, we lost our mum. She was heartbroken. And, we had Rihanna's verdict on the Friday. He was found guilty. This was meant to have been dealt with in December. But because, again, bone density, refusals, etc., it wasn't. So losing my mum, Rihanna's nan, it's just spiralled us again. But basically, I want to say to Starmer, he's got the death of 2 people on his hands from my family.
Yeah.
He's got to stand up and take note, because enough is enough.
Yeah. Well, listen, we will do what we can to help and try to get him to come and see you, because you deserve at least that respect and the notice that he should be giving, not only to you but to everybody in this country. And, he walks around, he goes to an iftar, and talks about how the community, the Muslim community, is so great for Britain.
And it's the rubbish he puts online, isn't it?
I know.
The news, and he's like, "Oh, I'm out to protect these women and children, etc." There's a death, there's a rape, there's something every single day under his government.
Yeah.
But he'd rather fly off to, again, I feel sorry for these girls that are involved in the Epstein case, but I may be a bit selfish. I don't care at the moment. I want our country dealt with. I want a reason as to why this happened to my daughter.
Yeah. Yeah. And how he let it happen, because he did. There's no doubt about it. Siobhan, listen, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for spending time with us. And we'll talk again, I'm sure. But I'll do what I can to put some pressure on these scumbags, to come and see you. Siobhan White, the mother of Rhiannon White, brutally murdered in a horrible way, by the way. And I know that might sound ridiculous, but absolutely and utterly, degraded, brutalised, horribly attacked by this little bastard, to be quite frank. Quite upsetting, that. Quite upsetting. But we'll go on, because unfortunately, more and more of these scumbags are arriving literally by the day. 2,200, we were told, up until, I think, Monday or Tuesday of this week, have come on small boats since the beginning of January. And how many of those are going to end up in prison? How many of those are going to end up stabbing somebody to death? How many of those are going to rape and assault sexually young women in this country? How many of our women and girls are going to be attacked by those 2,500 people coming into the country that we don't want and that we don't ask for and that we don't really believe in? That is the problem. Susie says this: Starmer has spent his entire career protecting the very worst in society. He hates us. He really is awful, isn't he? And Jess Phillips ought to be ashamed of herself, shouldn't she? She hasn't even answered Rhiannon White's mother's letters. Siobhan's written to Jess Phillips and been ignored. How the hell can these people even live with themselves? How awful is that? And many, many different aspects of this story will be discussed over the course of the next 24 hours and probably the next 48 hours, maybe the next 72 hours. We'll talk to Liam Halligan now, though, from Daily Telegraph, and, of course, a man who knows a thing or two about the markets, because, Liam, a very good morning to you. The big story, I suppose, or one of the big stories this morning is not so much how are we going to get these British people back to the UK, what exactly are the markets going to be doing, because we've seen activity in the Straits of Hormuz, we've seen activity from the Iranians attacking oil tankers, the price of oil looks to be going up, the price of energy is probably going to go up. What are you seeing from that perspective this morning? Very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. I was in Oman just a couple of weeks ago, which of course is the southern part of the Strait of Hormuz, the vital choke point of the global economy, the mouth to the Persian Gulf, the place where about a quarter of the world's oil passes through there every single day. And of course, this is a very serious situation. It's not just that the US has attacked Iran, it's that Iran has retaliated, as you just heard from Isabel there in Dubai. And so markets are feeling that, gosh, the straits are being blocked, the Iranians are laying mines, this could go on for days or even weeks. And that's why the price of oil, sorry to sound so, pecuniary, if you like, sorry to talk about financial markets when people are obviously lying under the rubble as a result of the bombing, but the oil price has gone up about 10 to 15% overnight in a single bound. And I'm afraid, as I wrote in the Sunday Telegraph at the weekend, there's a fashionable view that oil doesn't matter. Oil really, really matters. The global economy uses 105 million barrels of oil a day. Oil is in everything that we use. It's not just energy and heating. The UK still uses fossil fuels, not least oil, for 70% of its energy. It's a combined primary energy needs, even though we need renewables for quite a lot of our electricity production. So this is a major, major issue. This is going to lead to a lot more inflation in the UK. It's going to exacerbate the cost of living crisis. It's going to make the government's task much, much harder, not just politically, of course, but also economically. Again, this is obviously war is first and foremost and always a humanitarian story, but there are big economic implications of this. And the economic implications will play a key role in the politics of what happens next.
Yes. And, you don't need to apologise, Liam, for talking about this, because it is a very, very important part of the story, because while obviously we watch with interest what's going on in terms of missiles being fired and drone attacks and iron domes and Israel and the Gulf and all the rest of it, at the end of the day, one of the reasons that this conflict will come to an end is because of economics, because, the Middle East, Dubai, Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, they don't want to be destabilized to the point where nobody wants to go there. They don't want to see a mass exodus of residents from Dubai. They want to make it a safe place to live. So, that is important in the same way that the global oil markets are important, right?
Of course. I mean, the Middle East is and always will be probably the most important energy exporting region of the world, not just oil, but gas as well. And you and I, Mike, we're just about old enough to remember the Yom Kippur War in 1973. The Arab-Israel conflict. The Yom Kippur War saw the price of oil quadruple. It was an absolutely seismic event. The whole landscape of global geopolitics changed. Suddenly you had Arab oil embargoes. Suddenly the OPEC energy exporters cartel was leading the news every night. Every kid who was paying attention had heard of Sheikh Yamani, of course. America stopped having massive gas-guzzling cars that we'd all watched in Starsky and Hutch and suddenly had little compact Japanese-style cars because they were trying to save energy. Well, Mike, back then, oil massively mattered. And back then, as I wrote in the Telegraph at the weekend, the world consumed 55 million barrels of oil every day, right? If oil isn't important anymore, why are we consuming 105 million barrels of oil a day now, almost double? This is going to touch every single aspect of our lives. Oil has gone up from $55 to $80 since mid-December. That is a 45% increase in one of the main sources of our primary energy use. It's gone up 10 to 15% in the last 24 hours. And if the Straits of Hormuz stay closed, then you're going to get a lot of speculative money going into the oil market, and we're going to hit $100 a barrel, going way beyond that. And that is going to impact everything, not just the cost of living crisis. It's going to impact our ability to grow, because we are now, Mike, given the insane net zero policies that we have in the North Sea, unlike the Norwegians and the Danes, who are still drilling in the North Sea. It's still a viable basin, still adding to their national wealth by extracting their own energy. We, of course, have this idiotic ban on drilling in the North Sea. We have an almost 80% tax on revenues raised from the North Sea by private companies risking their shareholders' capital because of Ed Miliband and the net zero obsession, which both main parties have followed so ridiculously, in my view, over the last 5 to 10 years. I would say, Mike, that as we see oil prices spike, a lot of that net zero consensus is going to be blown to smithereens. It's going to be blown to smithereens because the rubber is going to hit the road. Reality is going to intrude on virtue signaling nonsense, and there's going to be a clamor to try and regain some of our energy independence. The UK was an energy exporter not so long ago. We're now a significant energy importer. Iran doesn't just produce 4 to 5% of the world's oil every day, even though the oil's sanctioned. It still gets sold around the world. Oil's so important that the sanctions can do one, frankly. Their oil gets onto global markets and helps keep prices relatively tame. That oil could well be gone, but it's not just about Iran's oil. It's about Iran's control of that vital pinch point at the mouth of the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz. In the end, I think the real pressure on Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and relieve the global economy, including major energy importers like the UK, isn't going to come from, well-meaning commentators and so on. It's going to come from the Chinese, because 80% of China's oil imports, and China is the biggest energy importer in the world, go through the Strait of Hormuz. So the Iranians are going to be under enormous pressure from the Chinese to ease that global pinch point now. It's going to be push me, pull you, as far as the Iranians concerned, between wanting to respond to US aggression as they will see it and wanting to not completely alienate their Chinese allies. It sounds like mad geopolitics, but it's that balance upon which, for the next few weeks, the direction of the global economy hinges.
Yes. And I was reading a couple of stories at the weekend, one suggesting that one of the difficulties with putting tankers through the Straits of Hormuz and elsewhere in the Middle East is that the Lloyd's insurance companies and the brokers have put the prices up of insurance to such an extent that every single tanker is being asked to produce about £250,000 per journey in order to ensure that they don't get blown up. At the moment, it seems that there's a bit of a suspension of traffic, if you like, and a lot of tankers are kind of, sort of lining up behind one another and not going anywhere. So there's that one. But also the second question I have for you is if there is this kind of pressure on oil prices, and if there is the driving up of how much oil is going to cost to the ordinary man and woman in the street, does America have any remedy for that? Can America increase its own oil supply? Can it produce more oil, produce more barrels, so that the price doesn't go completely insane?
Let me answer that in reverse. So America, astonishingly, in recent years, has become a major energy exporter. The shale revolution in America has been really quite mind-blowing within energy industry circles. America's gone from being the biggest energy importer in the world to a significant energy exporter, not just shale oil, but liquefied natural gas as well. So America has got a big strategic petroleum reserve, that is barrels of oil that's put to one side. But when you think that the world, as I say, is using more than 100 million barrels of oil a day, and a barrel of oil, I'm a pretty tall bloke, it comes up to my waist, right? And I can't get my arms around it. It's a lot of oil. Then America's strategic reserve isn't really capable of moving global prices consistently. So there will be a spike in the oil price. We're seeing it now. It's likely to continue. And you're right. All Iran has to do, it has to, doesn't even have to lay mines in the Straits of Hormuz. It just has to say publicly that it's doing so. And then insurance rates will go absolutely nuts. And freight shipping won't be able to get through because it won't be insured. So nobody's going to, risk their cash putting an uninsured vehicle an uninsured vessel in harm's way. We're now seeing this is kind of an aggravation of what's already seriously curtailed global supply chains. Why? Because for a number of months, because of some would say Iranian-backed Houthi rebels on the Horn of Africa, at the mouth of the Suez Canal, a lot of ships aren't going through the Suez Canal, the main shipping route from Asia through to Europe and global markets and into the Med, because a lot of companies can't get insurance to go through the Straits of the Suez Canal. So those boats have to go all the way around Africa instead, adding weeks and millions of pounds to the cost of each voyage. All that extra cost, of course, goes into prices that consumers and firms pay in the shops or on supply chains for the goods and the commodities that are contained in those freight ships. So if you've got a situation, Mike, where the Strait of Hormuz is blocked and the Suez Canal is, seriously curtailed by, geopolitical tensions, then you have got the makings of a proper economic a global economy that simply cannot grow. Okay, I'm not going to say there's going to be some big collapse. We're some way from that yet, but it will seriously undermine global markets. It will seriously undermine global living standards at a time when stocks and shares around the world are seen to be very overvalued, pumped up by a lot of I wouldn't say AI hype, because artificial intelligence is a hugely important thing, but there's been a lot of speculative money that's gone into shares. And if global energy markets are stymied by the fallout from all this mad geopolitics, then that could also then start to influence equity markets, because it's hard for companies to be valued, the valuations to stay as high as they are, when global growth is curtailed. And when you have a spiraling oil price upwards, global growth will be curtailed. And that there's a danger there of a domino effect. And that, Iran is showing now it's a wounded animal, it's a caged animal, and it's a very, serious military power. It's a sophisticated place. They are lashing out across the Middle East, and they could start lashing out elsewhere. Obviously we're hearing of Iranian missiles striking bases in Cyprus, so on the fringes with respect of Europe. So it's not alarmist to say that we could be on the brink of a very, very major, not just global economic slowdown, but proper systemic collapse. Again, we're not there yet. But if it looks as if this situation is going to go on for days, weeks, and even months, where global oil supply lines in particular, and a lot of gas comes out the Persian Gulf as well in the form of liquefied natural gas, not least from Qatar, then we're going to see major spikes in energy prices, and that could seriously aggravate the whole global economy, not least financial markets. I'd like to say there's some good news here. I guess the only good news is that in the end, it's the economy that will spread the pain of this war around the world, and it's that economic pain which will put pressure on the various actors to cease hostilities.
Yes, I mean, I take your point, and people will be alarmed to see what happens over the next sort of few days, as you say, and weeks. But we've also got our own internal economic problems. We've got Rachel Reeves making her budget statement of one kind or another tomorrow in Parliament, we understand. We've got Robert Jenrick saying overnight that he's got a big announcement to make this morning at 8:30 about Rachel Reeves, which he says will be a devastating blow to her capability as a Chancellor. I don't know what that is. I don't know whether you've heard anything about that. But what's she going to say tomorrow, which will not really calm, presumably, anybody's nerves?
I think she should say as little as possible. The last thing this country needs is another, economic masterstroke by Rachel Reeves. Everything she does economic policy wise goes wrong, because everything she does economic policy wise is driven by broadly economically illiterate Labour left-wing backbenchers and activists, from the Employment Rights Bill, which is making it far more expensive to employ people, to the ridiculous increase in employer national insurance contributions, the lowering of the threshold where you start paying national insurance from about 12 grand to 5 grand, which is absolutely walloped employment, particularly at the lower end of the labour market, with youngsters trying to get on the jobs ladder. We've seen a big spike in youth unemployment. We've seen a big spike in the number of people not in education, employment, or training, so-called NEETs, young people not doing anything with their lives at all, often not because of their own lack of initiative. And so I hope she says as little as possible. There was talk, Mike, over the last couple of weeks, and again, I wrote about it in my Sunday Telegraph column, and I've written about it on my When the Facts Change Substack, that Rachel Reeves was going to address those issues I said in the North Sea to some extent by maybe easing what we call the EPL, the Energy Profits Levy. That is the 78% tax which is applied to the profits of oil and gas companies which drilling in the North Sea. Most of which are invested back in the projects that they're doing. There was talk that she would ease that this was a Tory initiative. Labour extended it. It now goes all the way to 2030. Why are you going to invest in the North Sea at all when there's a ban on new wells and your profits are going to be taxed at almost 80%? There was talk she was going to ease that rate of tax, trying to get some kind of growth going. A lot of jobs have been lost in the North Sea. 10 years ago, the UK's energy complex, particularly the North Sea, employed 500,000 people. It's now around 100,000. The GMB union and others don't like that within the Labour Party, but still the net zero zealots across Parliament, frankly, and in the Labour Party and the activist base, they're pushing for more and more of the virtue signalling. It may be that this, I thought the Gorton and Denton by-election with the resurgent, Green Party and a rampant Labour left would mean she wouldn't dare to touch that energy profits levy. She wouldn't dare to lower it. The fact now that the oil price has spiked, and I'm on your airwaves, people like me talking about the oil price, may mean that she's got a bit more political room for manoeuvre to actually say, look, this is a national emergency. We need to pump more of our own oil and gas. I'm going to make it less economically punitive to do so. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm sure her own head is scrambled at the moment about what she's actually going to do tomorrow. But when it comes to the big picture tax and spend, the best thing she could do is to give some kind of respite to businesses, give some kind of respite to hardworking people. You can't tax your way, Mike, to prosperity, whatever Labour's left-wing ideology is telling them. We have to ease up on businesses. We have to ease up on consumers. We can't keep responding to holes in the budget, holes in our national accounts by just taxing more. In the end, the only way we're going to fix those holes is by growing the economy to generate more revenue from more economic activity. If only the Labour government would understand that, then we may be able to get out of the situation that we're in.
Absolutely. Liam, great to talk to you as ever. Thank you very much indeed. Liam Halligan there, columnist at The Telegraph, Planet Normal, co-pilot, of course, with Alison Pearson, and also founder of When the Facts Change. Fantastic to talk to you, Liam. Thanks very much indeed. And we're pretty much at the end of the show, 9:33. But before we go, obviously, we can't go on a note of international dissent. So what we will do is play you Pooch is Pooch, because this is how...
966. Hey. Hey.
966, go ahead.
If you show me 1042, and after 9 years of service, if you'll show my canine partner Indy out of service 1042 for the last time. Hey, buddy, come here.
966, we received. All units stand by for a broadcast from the Trophy Club Police Department. Benton County, all units. After 9 years of dedicated service, K9 Indy, badge number K91, is retiring and signing off for his final shift. K9 Indy has made a significant impact in our communities by seizing over 2 kilos of powdered fentanyl, more than 4,000 pounds of marijuana, in addition to more than 35 pounds of methamphetamine and more. He's been instrumental in seizing over $300,000 in drug money and has participated in over 11 SWAT deployments.
Come here, buddy.
He has assisted in 44 criminal apprehensions, including a notable recent apprehension of a criminal gang member. Indy has educated many in conducting over 50 canine demos for public and school events, demonstrating his skills and dedication. Throughout his tenure, Indy has assisted over 38 local and federal law enforcement agencies, serving as an ambassador to the community and a trusted partner and friend to his handler, Sergeant Barry Sullivan. Indy has always answered the call, no matter the hour, to assist officers in our county and beyond. Thank you, K9 Indy, for your service and love for the job you have done to protect and serve. From all of us to you, Indy, we wish you a happy retirement. K9 Indy, you are 1042 for the final time. Denton County clear at 1806.
Good job, buddy. Good job. What do you say? What do you say? We appreciate it, County.
Oh, isn't that lovely? Such a lovely. Sorry.
Yeah.
We're all weeping now. That's beautiful, though, isn't it? I mean, it's so wonderful. And we make no apology. Yeah, we're all crying. We make no apology for playing that. And we keep doing it every day because we love dogs, frankly. They're much better than humans. We'll see you tomorrow, 7 o'clock. Don't miss it.
Remember, despite all of the others out there, it's always the others. Don't be a plank.